Hello, and welcome to the Berkowitz and Hannah Love of the Law podcast. I am Russ Berkowitz, senior partner of Berkowitz and Hannah, and I will be your moderator for this episode. On today's episode, our guest will be Jennifer Amdur, a partner at our firm and widely known as one of the young stars of the plaintiff medical malpractice bar here in Connecticut. Over the course of Jen's 12-year career, she has already made a name for herself as lead or co-counsel in many multi-million-dollar medical malpractice cases, including birth injury and pediatric cases where she has a special interest. I've been privileged to watch the progression of Jen's professional career from the time she came to work with us following law school. In my opinion, Jen serves as a role model for many young women who aspire to be a litigator but want to maintain some semblance of personal balance in their lives. Today, I'm looking forward to hearing Jen's story regarding where she gets her passion from in representing severely injured clients, especially birth injury, pediatric clients and their families, how she balances her professional and personal life, her philanthropic passions that I'm familiar with, and also whether there's any chance I'll someday be able to convince Jen to switch from being a diehard Boston Red Sox and Boston Celtics fan to a Yankees and Knicks fan. So without further ado, I welcome Jen to the show.
Thanks, Russ. Thanks for having me, and I'm excited to have this conversation.
Thanks for joining the show today. Jen, just to move things along, because we have a lot of ground to cover, and so the audience learns a little bit more about you early in the show, can you share with us some basics, including your personal background, educational experience, and what, if anything, in your life led you to become a lawyer and specifically a medical malpractice lawyer?
Sure. I guess there's kind of a lot to cover, and it's all sort of pretty simple story. So I grew up in Massachusetts. I came to Fairfield University, and while there, I already knew I wanted to go to law school. I kind of took the typical path of being a political science major and went directly to law school from there. You will not change me from being a Red Sox and a Celtics fan. That is deeply, deeply ingrained in me from my parents and from the way that I grew up in Massachusetts. I now have stayed in Connecticut since going to Fairfield U, and I'm a proud Fairfield University stag. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted to represent individuals. And I think that's the way in which medical malpractice and being a litigator kind of led me to that. I knew that pretty early on after an 8th grade project where we had to figure out how to debate a side of an issue, that I wanted to represent people, and that people whose voices were not always heard were the individuals that I wanted to represent. I actually, for a long time, wanted to be a public defender. I remember being in middle school and having one of my friend's grandmothers ask me what I wanted to be. And when I said I wanted to be a public defender, she laughed and said, "Well, why would you want to be a public defender?" And I remember saying, because I want to represent the voiceless. And that has always really been a passion of mine. So in law school, I had an opportunity to intern at a malpractice firm. I actually thought it would be some of the toughest 8 weeks of my life, but I knew that I could do anything for 8 weeks to get the experience, and quickly realized that being a medical malpractice lawyer, being an individual representing people who have been catastrophically hurt, actually accomplished what I really wanted to do, which was to give some sort of voice and advocacy to people during a really difficult and hard time in their lives, and quickly learned that that was a way that I could use my skills. And so that's kind of the short story and long story of how I became a medical malpractice attorney. But yes, my Boston roots are deep, and I grew up there in a pretty typical fashion, and now have a family here in Connecticut and have been working here ever since.
And you have 2 kids?
I do. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
How's that going?
Any given day is a new adventure. I think that being a mom and a litigator is something that is a journey. A mentor of mine was, when I asked her how to find a work-life balance, she specifically said to me, "There's no such thing." And she's correct. However, what I think she meant by that was there are going to be times as a lawyer that your attention has to be on your work. But there's balance in other ways, and I love being a mom, and I love being a lawyer, and figuring out every day how those two worlds work together.
It's hard, isn't it?
There are sacrifices along the way. There are also things that I learned about myself being a mom, and there's things I've learned about handling clients and what clients are going through that experience. And what I've learned as a lawyer has often proved sometimes useful with my children. There's nothing like a dinner table negotiation with a 3-year-old. So maybe I'm a little bit better at that from being a lawyer. Who knows?
And I know just from my own experience with you, where a lot of times after you've worked all day, spent the evening with your family, sometimes we talk about cases by email or text at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning before your kids probably get up.
Sure.
And so for those out there that have any, idea of what it might be like or whether they have an interest, I guess you're an example of there's not a lot of sleep. Let's put it that way.
There's not a lot of sleep time. It's an actual true story. When I had my first child, I had to have a cesarean section, and at the same time, I had a very, very important brief due for a client. On post-op day 1, I was in my hospital bed on the phone with one of our associates going over the final edits to get that brief out. And I argued that motion when I was 7 weeks postpartum having my first child, successfully, thankfully. But those are some of the things that you kind of do have to balance, and you find a way to do it. And you also, I always say with this job, it can take it away sometimes as far as balance, but you actually can find a lot of opportunities in a career like this, have special time with your children, because you can sometimes find a balance of you'll have depositions and then you'll have a little downtime and you can make it work. So there is a path forward for mom. It's an interesting career. And I also think that you become a really good role model for your children in how you have to handle the adversity of the day-to-day of this job.
One thing I've noticed over the years, and I've been doing this a long time, is that there are not a lot of female medical malpractice plaintiff attorneys. Maybe you can, if you ever noticed that yourself, and do you think that there's a specific reason why it's like that? I mean, there's a fair amount on the defense end where there's women defense attorneys that represent the hospitals and the insurance companies. But why do you think that there's not a lot of women that get in on our side of the case?
Yeah, I definitely noticed it. It really is a shame. I think that women can offer actually a really specific voice to individuals with malpractice. So I think there are many men who are very empathetic, but I think that women sometimes, especially as moms or as people who had children or nieces or nephews, have a special ability to show empathy to people who are injured. So I think it's a little bit of a disservice that there aren't more female litigators in malpractice. But it's certainly something I noticed early on in my career. Not only was I a female, but I was often the youngest one in the room. And it was a little disheartening at first to walk into a deposition, and almost always for the first 5 to 8 years of my career, the receptionist or the individual at the court reporter's office would announce that either the court reporter was here, the paralegal was here, or the deponent was here, unless they already knew me, because they just presumed that a younger woman was not one of the lawyers in these cases. And at first, I think it was very discouraging. Ultimately, I've told this to people before, I think sometimes being underestimated became my superpower in my earlier years. I think that I was consistently underestimated as both a woman and as someone who was younger, which actually gave me a little bit of a leg up, maybe, because if you did your work and you put in the hours and you were well prepared, I don't know that the other side was prepared to have an adversary that was maybe as prepared as I was, especially being younger. But I do think that women should give this career choice some thought. I think it is really meaningful. And I think that a lot of younger people are looking for meaning in their careers and in their career choices. That is something that this job, for me at least, is never lacking. The meaning behind what we do for people is always there. And I think that that is what, even all those really challenging times where it feels like there's no balance, changing people's lives allows you to kind of get through those hard.
At the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned that you have a strong interest in birth injury and pediatric cases. I always marvel, and we had a recent case where we obtained a substantial sum of money for a pediatric client who had a catastrophic brain injury, and you put together the mediation statement, you worked up the case, and you did a fabulous job. But where do you get this ability and this aptitude to understand and being able to assimilate it and communicate it to the other side in such a way that it gives the appearance that you're another physician that's involved in the case?
It's a good question. I wish I had an easy answer for it. I think that at the end of the day, part of that is preparation. I really, really, really try when we get in a new case to understand the medicine. And I spend a substantial amount of time reading articles and talking to experts. I think that a joke I sometimes make is I spend more time practicing, not literally practicing medicine, but learning and working in the medical field than I do in the legal field. And all I mean by that is when we get a new case, if it's substance matter I know or substance I don't know, I really try to dive into the medicine. Where that aptitude, so to speak, comes from, I'm not sure. I don't think that IAP biology class gave me enough medical knowledge to really explain that. But I think a lot of it is preparation. I think a lot of it is working to do better. I also think I have had some family members who have had serious medical conditions, and as part of being a family member, I have tried to really understand some of that medicine to become their health advocate. I think that might be part of it. Not to get too personal, but I also have two beautiful children, but both had complicated pregnancies where I dealt with some complicated issues, which only kind of both made me more understanding of and more empathetic of some of the issues that occur in birth injuries. But I do think that at the end of the day, a lot of it is preparation. A lot of it is trying to, though I'm not a physician and I know I won't know the medicine necessarily as the physician does, if I know the facts of a case, if you know the legal facts and the actual things that occur to our client, you often will know them better than the opponent. And so being prepared and knowing the facts, it will help you learn the medicine. And it's kind of a way which, though I might have an expert or a doctor or a physician who has specific expertise in something, and I might not have had all of that training, I do think that in a deposition, I know the fact of my case sometimes, if not many times, better than that, which allows me to understand.
I know for me, that first meeting with the clients that have a child that's been born with cerebral palsy or a child that's died in utero or after birth, those are meetings that stick with me pretty much over the course of my career and drives me to perform this diligence and preparation that you were just talking about. What is it about these cases, and even if it sounds like you're overlapping with me, what is it about birth injury cases, pediatric cases, where we hear these horrific stories on a weekly basis of potential new clients that led you into having this strong interest in birth injury pediatric cases?
I think it goes back a little bit. So as much as I wanted to be a lawyer since I was in middle school, when I got to college, I focused a lot of my kind of peace and justice issues of women's rights and access. And I have a really strong sense of a really strong pull maybe to trying to help women and women and children, right, kind of going hand in hand. But access for women has always been a special interest of mine. So I think that when it came to malpractice cases, I was able to combine two of my passions, which are advocating for people who need help and women and women's rights. It was kind of a natural thing that happened where it's how can I help women? When help can I advocate for people? And birth injury cases, pediatric cases was a really natural fit for that. I had spent a lot of time when I was young and in college and different things, really focusing on how women lack access to things like healthcare, education, all sorts of other issues that have plagued, our world. And when I decided to focus my career in medical malpractice, it was right there, kind of sitting there, that I wanted to help women who have suffered catastrophic injuries to themselves or their children.
And the feedback that I get from all the clients is that your passion is evident and your commitment is evident, and they're lucky to have you. I will say that I think that there probably is a lack of understanding of what's involved from the time that a client comes to us and says that something happened during my child's delivery or during the prenatal period or postnatal period, and they're basically throwing it in your lap saying, I need your help. Can you just tell the audience, just generally, before we even file a lawsuit, what actually goes into the work of investigating a medical malpractice case?
There's that initial client meeting, and they're all devastating, and they're all damaging, and all of those parents who come to us asking what happened to my child all need to be taken so very seriously. However, when I tell all of those clients during that first initial meeting is we have to take it one step at a time. We have to figure out what truly occurred. And the first step of any investigation is to get all the medical records. So I tell my clients, we are here to help you. The first thing we need to do is get every medical record. In a birth injury case, it is not just the record. It is imaging. It's pathology. It's fetal heart tracing. Anyone who's had a baby or maybe has a significant other that had a baby might remember being put on a monitor where they put things on your belly. Fetal monitors often tell a story that maybe the records don't tell. So it requires us to get a comprehensive set of records, which includes a number of different things. From there, we have to line up an entire team of experts. In a birth injury case specifically, you're looking not just at an obstetrician, not just at the delivering doctor. There could be midwives involved. There could be nurses involved. We also need to look at the infant, whether the infant has a birth injury or even if the infant has passed away. We need doctors who are perinatologists, neonatologists. We need cytopathologists. Sometimes need other forensic pathologists. We sometimes need hematologists, neurologists, a whole host of individuals, radiologists, pediatric neuroradiologists. We need individuals who have sometimes a higher level of obstetric training called maternal fetal medicine specialists. And that's just to name a few offhand. So often these birth injury cases, before we've even taken a case, we've had 4 to 6 different subspecialists review all of the different medical records to put together a really comprehensive look into both mom's care and the baby's care. And understanding whether something during that in utero period caused the catastrophic results that we're investigating. So it's a bit of a process. People don't always realize that when we have a medical malpractice case, many of those cases can take a couple of years. And so we really kind of live with our client. We are really there for them during really horrific times. We get to know them. We are there for whatever they may need during those times. We sometimes wear multiple hats. We're dealing with what's going on in their personal lives. We're dealing with what's going on with the child that we're trying to represent and the mom we're told to represent. We really take a holistic approach to these things. So right during that initial meeting, as hard and difficult as those conversations are, we know we have a whole set of things we need to do before we can even commit to taking that case. So there's a lot of work in the very early stages.
And not that other kinds of medical malpractice cases that we handle aren't complicated, but at least over my 30-something years of practice, these birth injury cases are the most complicated out of all the cases we handle. Would you agree about that?
Yeah, I think that by and large they are. We've, as you know, more than I do even, right? There's all sorts of other cases involving pediatrics or adults that can be sometimes equally complex, but by and large, they're the most complex cases. You really need to understand them best. And there is so much literature in the field of obstetrics, pediatrics that you have to handle on. So I think on any given day, they're the most complicated. Of course, there's an exception to every rule. But by and large, they are the most complicated. And you're dealing with people's children. As I tell those clients, we're dealing with the most intimate thing that likely happened in your life, child, pregnancy. So I think they take a lot of compassion and empathy, as well as being some of the most medically complex. So they kind of have the whole ball of wax as far as being a medical malpractice litigator when you're trying to handle a extraordinarily difficult time, complex medicine, and maybe a case that you have to really follow that child and see how they do over, the first 1 to 2+ years of their life.
But at the end of the day, it's pretty gratifying doing this kind of work, even though the time, the effort, the money spent, the emotions of the family that we sometimes get caught up with, the combativeness of the other side in defending these doctors. I can just speak for myself, and I'm sure that you would echo this. There's nothing like that hug at the end of a case, telling them that we changed their life, right?
Yeah, that hug. I also think that, again, not to focus too much on a brain injury, but a lot of times as a mom, I can understand this too. You feel that you were so let down by your obstetricians. You're about to have a baby, the happiest day of your life. I've heard you say that to plenty of clients, right? This is going to be the happiest day of your life. And women really want to be heard. And it goes back to, my passion in life, that women's voices are always the ones that people listen to. And I think that pregnant moms are sometimes no different. And so when someone has a brain injury case, from the mom's perspective, often they've shared with me, they want someone to hear them and hear their story. And so I think that is so the most gratifying work that can be done, because not only are you changing their life and you're getting that hug at the end of the story, but many, many clients have said, thank you for listening to my story. And I think that is what keeps me going, right? During those hard times with no balance, listening to people, listening to women, listening to moms, dads, loved ones, listening to people is so important. And I think we give our clients someone, if nothing else, that listens to them.
And if a law student or a young lawyer came up to you and said, hey, Jen, what do you believe a medical malpractice attorney needs to possess to be successful? What would you say to them?
I think they need to be diligent and they need to be empathetic. I don't know that you can be a successful malpractice lawyer if you don't have diligence and perseverance and a desire to really know your cases, but you also have to have empathy. These cases are not just about the outcome, they're about people. And if you forget that the cases are about people, I don't know that you'll be successful.
And at least from my perspective, I talk about that hug where they thank us for everything that we've done. We've changed their life, but we really haven't changed their life because they still have to go home to a special needs child. And I think that one thing I've noticed about you is that despite the fact that that's still going to occur, they feel very content knowing that if something ever happened to them, that their child would be taken care of because of the way we handled the case, compensation that the clients have received, and how you've treated them. And as you say, you served as their voice for them where they couldn't be heard in another way, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so. I guess, right? I hope that our clients feel that we've done all we can, right? We can't change the outcome that brought them to us, unfortunately. But what we can change is that they've been heard. We can change that their families been fairly compensated. Hopefully, we can change physicians or hospitals or healthcare providers, ways in which they operate, whether as an institution, as an individual, serves as a reminder to them of how to care for patients. I hope that those things are also being established before our clients. We can never change the horror that brought them to us, but we can change how they can navigate it going forward, both from a financial standpoint, hopefully also feeling like they got to tell their story, that they got to be listened to.
Well, in closing, you're certainly living a life that you can be proud of. And I'm happy that you were able to sit with us today and share your philosophies and what you do around here. One more question. Any chance that your kids will be anything other than a Red Sox or a Boston Celtic fan?
Not if I can help it. As you may know, the Celtics just won the championship. I'm not sure if you knew that, Russ. I know there. But I just
weren't healthy. That's the only reason.
Yeah. Hey, Bretson did a heck of a job. But I had my 3-year-old saying, Jason Tito, running down the hall. So I think we really got them covered. We'll see.
Thanks again, Jan. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Russ. It's a great conversation.